Hello, everybody. Jason from MisprintedMTG.com, and today we have another episode of Misprint Masterclass. On the desk in front of us for today are corner errors. So this is going to be an in-depth look at the variants of corner errors that are out there. So let's get started. The most common type of corner error that we tend to see on cards are square corners. Square corners are a result of the corner rounding die not being implemented on 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the corners. Cards are cut first into horizontal rows, and then the horizontal rows are split up into individual cards. So you get a stack of square corner cards, and those are put through a corner rounding die. So as mentioned just a few seconds ago, here is a card with one square corner. Here is a card with two square corners. And you can see that this isn't actually fully square. The bottom one is a little more square. This one is a little less square. This is a result of it just nicking the corner of the corner cutting die, or this one missed it completely. When it comes to cards with two square corners, they're most commonly seen on the right hand side or the left hand side. Two square corners on the top and bottom are much more rare, and we'll show an example of one of those in a little bit. Here is a card that has three square cut corners. You can see the fourth one here. There's a bunch of damage, and it looks like this was a result of its corner not getting, well, actually, this corner got clipped properly and these three didn't, but the damage is a remnant from the corner cutting process. So here's a card with three square corners. And last but not least, here's a card with four square corners. This is what the card looks like before it goes into the corner rounding die. So it has both the vertical and horizontal cuts. Now here's a card with two square corners where they're at the bottom. My camera decided to go wonky on the focus, but this is a much more rare style of two square corner cards. Now this is not to be confused with crimps that have the card kind of cut off early because the crimp is a little bit further up the card. That's a completely different error. That happens when the card is getting crimped, and those square corners are just a result of the blade that separates the foil packs from one another, whereas this is an instance of it missing the corner cutting dies entirely. Now, we usually don't see square corners on diagonal opposites, but here is a really rare example. It's very fragile, so I can't take it out of the booster to show you guys, where we have a square corner on the bottom left and the top right. Now, you can see here that the square corner is actually a little bit white. That's because the square corner hasn't been fully, it's partially cut through. If we were to flip it over to the back, and if my camera were to focus, let's see if we can, you can see that the back is intact, whereas the front is going through a few layers of the card. So that's kind of a partial square corner where it like divides the cardstock into its various layers. That is also a variant that we see on square corner cards. Now, square corners aren't limited to just normal size cards. Here is an oversized card with two square corners on the bottom. And here's a really neat thing that I've seen happen a few times. This card was actually found folded in the booster pack like such. It has one square corner. You can see that the top corners are square and the bottom right corner is square. And because the card was folded, only one of the corners got rounded. This would be pretty much considered a damaged card if it didn't have square corners. Those square corners are something that can't be replicated outside the factory, so that we know that it's very likely that this is a legitimate misprint, and this is how the card was found. So we could believe that story because of the physical evidence that's here on the card. Now, after square corners, the most common cornering error that we see are the wrong corner dies being used. So here's a 4th edition card with the corner dies for alpha. These corners are more round than they should be. And there's really not much more to say than that. It was just a confusion in which corner dies they should be using. Back in the early days, Cardamundi didn't really have to worry about keeping corners consistent on the products that they printed, because they just did poker cards. But when Magic the Gathering came around, um, the cards needed to be exactly the same every time, and sometimes there was a little bit of miscommunication and the wrong dies were used. So alpha cut fourth is the most commonly found of alpha cut corners. There also exists alpha cut revised. Now, with alpha cut revised, you want to be careful. A lot of people clipped the corners of their revised cards to match their alpha and beta cards so that it would fit in their decks without standing out. So you want to make sure the card is really clean, that it has a good sufficient amount of border distance in the corner. And also something to note is that every single alpha cut revised card that I've seen has been back cut. Back cut means that the corner rounding die was implemented from this direction downwards. If you go to my website and check out the useful links section, there's a link for the Green Disenchant Project. It's a website made by a fellow misprint collector whose name is Ron, or Neuron. He has very good detailed pictures on how to identify front cut versus back cut. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, check out his website. It's really informative. Now another set, extremely rare to find, Alpha Cut Ice Age. And I believe this happened on commons and uncommons as well. And I like just showing this one off. This is an Alpha Cut 4th edition card that is actually also miscut. There are a few of these out there. They're super rare and super hard to find. It's what I call a double whammy error. You have two unrelated misprints on the same card. I just like showing this off, so I felt like including it in the video. And just to show you guys that stuff out there like that exists. This is a card that doesn't have the alpha roundness on it. This has the roundness of a poker deck. So it's a little bit more round than alpha. Really cool. Only from this starter deck have these been found. Another example of corner errors that we see is the corner cutting die being off target. So we can see we have this one square corner up here at the top, but at the bottom we kind of have this corner just in like the middle of the card, and my camera's just not cooperating for this video. But you can see that we have a corner where we're not supposed to have a corner. So off target corners happen sometimes. Sorry about bumping my mic there. Now with this type of error, is really important to have at least one corner square on it. Otherwise, this would be something that you'd be able to do to a normal card. But luckily, every time I've seen this happen, you have a square corner with it. I haven't seen one where you don't have a square corner. Here's another example where both the top corners were missed and were a little further down the card. So the card was shifted a little up, which resulted in the corners being cut further down the card, and the bottom resulting in two square corners. My camera is going crazy today. I apologize for that. Now I'm including these in corner errors. There's something that collectors sometimes refer to as flag errors. I'm including them in the corners error video because they generally tend to happen in the corners of cards. It is possible for them to happen in the middle, but that's a much more rare occurrence that I have seen very few examples of. So a flag error is when the sheet gets folded and prior to cutting, and so you can see here this was folded just like this. The card was cut, and as a result we have this attached flap of card. And like I said, this usually happens on the corners of cards. Now there's 3 variants of this. I only have 2 variants. The third variant is extremely rare and I haven't been able to track one down for myself. This is a post-print flag, which means that the sheet was printed and then prior to cutting, the sheet was folded and it was cut afterwards. This is the second example, the second variant that you see. This is a preprint fold, where obviously the card was, or the sheet was folded prior to printing one of the sides, and then again after cutting, unfolded. And the third variant is actually one where it gets folded after printing one side and before the second. So, for example, if this got folded prior to printing and then got so the result, the thing that I'm trying to explain is a fold where you'll actually have just double printing on the flap. I think I've only seen like one example of that. So you'll have a back and a front on the flap. It's super rare and really cool to see. That goes ahead and I'm a mess. My camera is a mess. These cards are not a mess though. They are all square corner cards, and you guys now have a better idea of what's out there. Thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you learned something. I know it's a shorter video than normal, but there's not too many variants of square corner cards out there. So thank you for tuning in. If you like the video, like, subscribe, check out the website, misprintedmtg.com, to learn more about misprints and rarities, and I will see you in the next episode.